On Bulletin Board this week, we bring you our first Bulletin Board special feature. And we're starting out with an overdue discussion as we explore the future of local church leadership.
Young elders and department leaders need to step up in these last days and take the baton from the veterans who have served the Lord for so many years. The youth are being corrupted by the things of this world, and we as their peers need to set the right example so that they may be inspired to get involved too. Young people also feel more comfortable when approaching a younger person in church leadership that can relate with what they are going through. 1 Timothy 4 verse 12. Let no one despise you for your youth, but set the believers an example in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, in purity.
So, I must say discussion. So I don't think it would be appropriate for you to witness a discussion between me, myself, and I. So I'm particularly amped that Samuel Mark Julius is here in our studio. And he maybe doesn't know it, but he's actually the inspiration for today's discussion. I heard that he was serving as an elder in Steenberg SDA Church this year, and I immediately thought, look at local church leadership. An anthropologist, archaeologist, historian, history buff type, Gen Z, local elder who loves Jesus so much. But tell us, Samuel, who are you?
Yo, I feel like it only goes downhill from there. You've done an excellent job. I'm a follower of Christ. I think that's a real defining feature. I'm an imperfect human being. And I think I've been put on this earth, I was thinking about this recently, to try and articulate my experiences in a way that kind of fosters like interconnectivity, because I think we can all relate so much, and sometimes maybe we just don't know how to express it. And so I think that's one of the reasons why I'm here. But either way, I am excited to be here and excited to delve into this discussion with you and our Bulletin Board viewers.
Awesome. Our Bulletin Board viewers. So now we're here and we're going to do this. And we're going to talk about the future of local church leadership. Actually, we've already started talking to you.
A very good question, and one that we need to address urgently as far as I'm concerned. I think that we need to have a well-run mentorship program in the church whereby our young folk are mentored, but really well. I'd say between the ages of 16 and say 20, they need to have a good mentorship program where you have your junior officials in the church, junior deacons, junior elders, and then from the age of 20 onwards, we actually have our younger people actually filling these roles, not necessarily in a junior capacity, but running with them. Our young people, I feel, have got access as leaders in the church to technology. They've got good ideas. They come with an energy that we don't have as older folk. But older folk need to be there to mentor the young people. And together we can have a well-oiled system where the church and the leadership of the church can be run really well. I don't think as older folk, the older folk in the church should be threatened by the younger people, but rather everyone needs to work together as in a family to run the church. And I think if we have that approach and if we've got that mindset, that the leadership of the church will have a very positive outlook now already and well into the future.
What I can say is words with no actions mean nothing at all. So if the church won't act on what they're saying, it will go down the drain. It won't work out.
I think the future of our local church leadership should be more youth orientated. The old people should step down and maybe give the youth a chance to show what they can do, and they should step up, and the youth should lead the youth. And then, yeah.
So, Samuel, let's define for the purposes of this discussion, What do we mean by local church leadership?
So I was thinking about this, and I think a big part of it is being representatives of Christ and help running His church, because ultimately it's His church, but it's our local community of believers, and so you have friends and you have family in these communities, and I think church leadership, in my understanding, isn't about calling shots. It's more about being of service wherever you are needed. And so that's what Christ's leadership method was all about. That's why He bent down to wash the disciples' feet. And so that can be in the capacity of a post, a formal kind of position. But I think more than that, it's about setting an example for other believers. Fundamentally, I think that's what local church leadership should entail.
And that just spreads it out to everybody. It takes away the exclusivity of leadership. And that's something that is a favorite pet peeve of mine, is that leadership is made out to be this exclusive thing that you get to by hook or by crook. Because sometimes you believe that there's a rite of passage to leadership. There isn't.
Yeah.
Your rite of passage is whether God wants you to do this.
Yes. Yes.
So, yes, I love what you're saying. The reason for framing it local church leadership is, from my side, I believe that everything starts at the local church. Well, everything starts in the family, but outside of the family, everything starts in the local church.
Yes.
So we have a global church. We have the General Conference, and we have all these acronyms. I'm not even going to go into them. Our church loves acronyms. And we have all these things happening around the world and everything, we have TV channels, we have broadcast news channels and stuff. But actually, the action happens at the local church. The action happens where you go to church every week.
Yeah.
How's that been for you?
It's also powerful to see the kind of responsibility that you have in helping be of service at your local church, because fundamentally, people are going through a lot during the week, and this is the one opportunity that they have to connect with God. And so you need to try and foster that in a way that brings us all closer. And so you can't think about the individual. You can't think about what you want in that moment. You have to think about, okay, what works better for our group of believers? How can we be inspired so that when we leave church this week, we can then be Christians? Because being Christians doesn't happen at church, right? It happens when we leave church and we go out into the world and we are following Christ's example in that way.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility, I think.
I love that. And it's a reminder to me that the stuff I go through during the week is me being a Christian in this world, in this real world, and figuring out how to do things, having tough times, having awesome times, and then the opportunity to bring it into one space where everybody's bringing all the things that happen to them. That's church,
Yes, exactly. It's the crossroads where everyone is grappling with what it means to be a Christian during the week, right? And so we're having those conversations. Yeah.
So, local church, now you know. So, we've been busy for this special feature. We got a text message saying, "Thank you for touching on this very important yet very much neglected topic. The current face of church leadership does not reflect our millennials and Gen Zs, and this needs to change. We should be having a succession plan in place whereby we are training those that will be responsible for the future of the church, our youth. This means that our youth are our future is not just a slogan, but through concerted efforts of all departments becomes part of the vision of the church." Sure, I feel like this is a call to action from my classmate, Denise Duplessis. Samuel, what are your thoughts?
100%. I agree with it, because we're not thinking about what happens next. We're so focused on the current moment that we can't even envision what our church would look like 10 years from now. And life happens. I think fundamentally for me, it starts with care. If you care about your young people, you put them in positions where they are willing to lead. Firstly, so that they care enough about the community of believers themselves to be, willing to be of service. And so you can't train young people if you don't care about them first. And so when we're showing our youth that we care, when we're showing them that they matter, when we're showing them that we care about what their interests are, then we can start training. And the training is super important, and it's really necessary, because we can't do this thing just with the inadequate skills that we have. But at the same time, I think it's about asking that young person in your church, how has your day been? What are you going through right now? And finding ways to connect with people before we start, getting them set up for leadership.
I really like that, finding ways to connect with people, because I've sort of found over the past, I don't want to give it a time period, but over the past while, years, decades maybe, the face of the local church has slightly changed, You don't always know every single person in church. I don't know if that's your experience, but it's certainly been mine. And I'm just wondering now, as you're saying, connect with the young people, know your young people. How do we get past that? And also, if we and it's probably this in the same basket, if we are speaking to people that we don't know, whether on social media or online or whatever, and we're reaching out to people that we don't know, how do we connect?
Well, it's something that I've been struggling with, because in my role as a, up-and-coming anthropologist, my job is to go and speak to people. And I'm an introvert. I'm shy. I'm really self-conscious. I'm always thinking afterwards, I'm thinking, oh, you shouldn't have said that because, But I think in that moment, it's about letting that be between you and God afterwards. I think showing the intent firstly, to just have a conversation with someone and ask them, okay, where is it that maybe I can make your church experience a little bit better? Or what are you enjoying about church? Because a lot of times we focus on what's missing.
Problems.
Exactly. But what is there that you really enjoy, and how can we enhance that experience already?
I like that.
And fundamentally, and this makes it a little bit easier, the fact that the person is coming to your local church means you already have something in common. So you can start there.
Start with the church building.
Yeah. How did you get here this morning,
Love it.
Yeah. Did you enjoy last week's sermon? Maybe not that one, but...
So well. So how did you get to be an elder? I'm really, really interested in this story.
If I knew the answer to that, I'd be lying. I think what it is that I said yes to things in church before this. So before this year, I was always involved. So we had this wonderful lady, Auntie Grace. She runs the children's ministries program, or used to, for many, many years. And I grew up kind of under her tutelage, and she would ask me if I want to do something, and I would say, okay, yes, Auntie Grace, sure, I'll do it. And part of that in the beginning was, I'm a bit of a people pleaser, so I struggled to say no. But afterwards, I really enjoyed the process of allowing God to use me, because God speaks to you first before he uses you to speak to other people. It's the most beautiful thing. And so I just kept saying yes to things. And I built a lot of relationships with the people in my church. I'd like to think that people feel like they can speak to me. And then I got a call last year to ask if I was willing to serve as an elder in training. And, I had no idea what that entailed. And at first I was like, is that a board position? Because if it is, I'm saying no. But eventually, I sat with it, and I spoke to my parents about it, and I prayed, and I asked God. God and I had a conversation, and what I heard from him was that if he didn't want me to be in that position or to serve in that capacity, then I wouldn't have been approached. And so I said, okay, God, I'm gonna allow you to use me. And so far, it's been a really, really learning experience. I've learned so much, and also I've enjoyed, kind of having to connect with people in a capacity that I didn't necessarily have the responsibility to do before. And so it's taught me a lot about, working with people and listening, because as an elder, and I didn't know this before, the main thing that you do is you listen. And it's a really beautiful thing, because you learn so much just by listening. Yeah.
Okay, so there are so many things to unpack, and I'm so overwhelmed with all the things, but I'm going to start here. Elder in training. Is that a normal thing, a normal feature of your church? Is it a new thing?
I don't think it's a normal feature. I hadn't really heard of it before. And I think it was our church was kind of um, they were quite decisive in that they wanted to incorporate more young people. And so it was important to say that, okay, we want you to fulfill this role or to have this responsibility, but to know that you don't have the pressure of having to get it right. Because I don't know what I'm doing. And so I'm going to get things wrong. And so
Yes.
having that all day in training really helps because it takes a lot of that pressure away because I am learning. At the same time, I'm going to do the best that I can and I'm going to ask for God's. I mean, I need to depend on God more than ever. But at the same time, I don't have to worry about, not making mistakes because making mistakes is a big part of how we grow.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, and we need to frame it that way a lot more.
Yeah.
We will make a lot more people comfortable. So a couple of weeks ago on the big question, we had the question was, should an elder be married? What's your answer to that question? I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I don't think an elder should be married. I think, in First Timothy 3, it speaks about an elder, having the responsibility to manage a household. And I think management doesn't just come from being married or, being a husband to a wife. I think management comes in whatever capacity you have in that household. So in my household, I'm a youngest brother. And so there are certain responsibilities that come with being a youngest brother, but I need to manage those responsibilities in the capacity that I have. And that's my take on it. Yeah.
I love that. Being the youngest brother, and he spoke about responsibilities as the youngest brother. That is another episode of Bulletin Board that we need to do because what responsibilities does the youngest one have? Anyway, speaking about the big question, it's not Bulletin Board without the big question.
Welcome back to the big question. I'm Robin Phyllis, and today I'm here with Simpiwe. Simpiwe, my question for you is, how do you know that God is real?
Because God is real because of his reality. He does things that no man or human being can do. So we see by his actions determines his reality.
Look, I think it's pretty evident in our everyday lives. From morality to how people live to how society works with each other. That is proof of an existing God, especially when you look at the values that are attributed to that God and in how he relates to society.
Well, the evidence for God's realness is there in just waking up every day and we experience the fullness of life. We witness the chirping birds and we see the beauty of nature, but also just experiencing good deeds of kindness from other people and just seeing how everything just works together in the universe. You know what they say, all things work together for those who love the Lord. So that to me testifies as evidence of God's realness.
Good afternoon. The question was posed to me, what is the future of local church leadership? Quite frankly, I cannot definitively confirm what the future is of local church leadership, but I would like to share my point of view on the topic. Firstly, a church leader needs qualities that positively influence and morally support the congregation and the community. Such qualities include moral trustworthiness, social aptitude, empathy, pastoral care, and more. There comes a time when leadership must be passed from one generation to the next. What is required is for young men of God to step up and step out, to not feel intimidated by assuming this responsibility. Be a mentor, an administrator, a relational, and an overseer. A leader must be someone who others can follow in the way they treat others and in the way they live before others. I believe the future of local church leadership depends on young men who love God and has a burning passion not only to lead, but to serve. May God bless us all.
If we talk doctrine, then I think we are steering away from the original doctrine that we understand about the Seventh-day Adventist, and it is a bit worrying because It confuses the people that think they know what Seventh-day Adventist is, and it also confuses the people that come in and are told what Seventh-day Adventist is, but with the confusion that now is changed. And I know that the sense is that we are a movement. But even if we are a movement, we shouldn't be fundamentally shifting. But I see a shift fundamentally.
And we're back with our bulletin board special feature with Samuel, Mark, Julius. So let's talk about leadership capacity building in our churches.
Wow. That's a really big one, right? And I think for me, when I think of leadership capacity building, it's about exposing people to things that they haven't been exposed to before, but having that safety net and that freedom. And so,
Kind of like what you explained previously.
exactly. And so, as much as we want our youth to be involved, and we should be pushing towards that, we need to realize that our senior members of our church are invaluable to the future of our church. When we think about the future of our church, we just think about the youth. But who is going to train the youth? And so we need people that are in those positions already to say, listen, when I was young and, they asked me to be a deacon, this was what I enjoyed about it. This is what I really didn't like. This is maybe how you could manage your time so that you're more effective. This is my tips for how I changed my devotional routine so that I could connect with God in a different way. And so our older folk have these, treasure troves of wisdom. But it's about allowing the young person to first have exposure and then also to say, here's how I'm going to support you. And being conscious about doing that, because I think any young person worth their salt knows that they have a lot to learn. And so capacity building is also about putting yourself in positions so that young people know that they can turn to you when they don't know what to do, which will be often.
Yes, it will be. Yeah. You've just taken the sting out of there's a fear when we talk about succession planning or capacity building, and it's the fear of the person currently there, and we need to acknowledge that. And you've just taken the sting out of this whole thing, saying that we need you.
Yeah.
We need everybody who is currently serving. We need your wisdom. We need your support and your nurturing. The way you described it, the examples you gave, tell me that you have experienced a lot of nurturing support in your life.
100%. You can't do it without the people around you. And the church, the Bible theorizes the church as a body for a reason. Have you ever seen your pinky toe decide it's going to do its own thing and it's just going to walk off? No, it needs the rest of the body to move and to grow and to function, right? And so just like that, we are a body, we need each other. We all fulfill different roles, different tasks. We bring something different to the table. And a lot of times, the sad thing is that we don't know what someone is bringing to the table until they're not there anymore. And then we realize we can feel that wound, we can feel what's missing. So I think it's about appreciating people while they're there and drawing from one another.
Yeah, I'm just so struck by that, because we say all these beautiful words when someone is gone. I heard about a gentleman a few months ago. Someone told a story about a gentleman who said that he wants to be at his memorial service. So 1 month before he passes, he wants to be. And I think it's about it's not only about giving people their flowers while they're alive. It's about acknowledging the learning that we have from someone's life. And all lives are an opportunity for us to learn. And that just sort of brings me into this thing that we're all involved in capacity building because we're all growing. And as a church family, we're all nurturing each other. We should be nurturing each other. Yeah. And I found that we tend to silo the ways in which you can be a leader in church. So you're going to be the leader of the children's division. You're going to be the music leader. You're going to be the leader of personal ministries. And and then you just sort of focus on your thing and you don't know what you're supposed to do because the previous leader is upset that they didn't get chosen for the post. So we put a whole lot of other extras into it, as if we all just involved in growing this church by growing each other.
Yeah.
And learning from each other.
And I think a big part of what you're alluding to is humility. I think humility is the key to being a leader in the local church, because the moment I say, well, how can the children's ministry leaders tell me about being an elder? Or the moment I say, how can the music ministry's leader tell me about being a deacon? I think we're missing the point completely. You know, the devil had a position in heaven.
He did.
He did. And eventually it was that pride and that look at myself, I'm so great at what I do, that got him cast out of heaven. And so I think we always need to be watchful for that ego and that kind of inner voice that wants to say, you know, who are you to tell me? And to say, listen, someone else has wisdom, maybe in a different way. And, you know, maybe someone's wrong, but let's have a discussion first. Let's see, how can we integrate? Where can I, you know, grow and have room for improvement? Because we all have room for improvement.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. And two things have just come up in me that from what you're saying. The one is seasons. So I've experienced that there are seasons when there are a lot of people in leadership. The leadership is vibrant. There are a lot of people, you know, involved in leadership. And the more people are involved, yes, it does become tricky and whatever to manage it, but it's just better, you know. And then there are seasons when one person has multiple posts in the church, you know, has to cover multiple things. And I've just realized, because that was the second thing, people like doing a whole lot of stuff in church. I just realized that those two things are connected. It's a season. So when you find that you're not having a lot of people agreeing to hold a leadership position in the church, you know, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It's a season.
Wow.
You know, and I found us like feeling so bad. The nominating committee didn't do its job because there's then so many vacancies. It could just be a season. And all we need to do as a church is pray, you know, because through this, there'll be a different season next year maybe, and you'll find the churches, like every single, you even creating posts in the church. I love it when that happens because it means we have people.
Yeah.
You know, who want to get involved. What do you think of navigating our way through seasons, you know, through things that, through periods of time that are different from others?
I think when firstly, I just love that metaphor because it's also really hopeful because it means that the church isn't stagnant and it means that the current situation isn't the forever situation. But I think when we are in the season of winter and the leaves are not appearing on the trees, right? It's important to encourage those of us that are the roots, you know, those of us that are, you know, maybe occupying 2 or 3 posts and saying, as someone who maybe doesn't have a post or someone who is in a different leadership capacity, how can I make this person's life easier? Because while we love to serve and God really He provides us with so much strength that we can't even imagine, we are human beings and we get tired and we get weary. And so I think it's important for us to rally around those individuals and say, how can I make your load a little bit lighter? And that doesn't mean, you know, becoming the deputy and now, you know, asking for a post or whatever. I think it's in the small ways we can try and help rejuvenate one another because we all need to be nourished. We can't have someone pouring everything in and then they're not even getting support or they don't feel seen. And so while it's not about the individual, we also need to keep in mind that we are human beings.
We are.
Yeah.
We are. At the end of the day, that's what has qualifies us to be on earth.
Yeah.
And so kind of the polar opposite of that is there are leadership positions that are either, and this happens everywhere, there are leadership positions that are reserved for certain people. You know, whether it's overt or covert, it doesn't matter. There are certain people that want to be in that position, and if they're not in that position, then they somehow don't come to church. You know, so what are your thoughts on, you know, just like people staying in a certain post and then the position in church becomes synonymous with that person?
I think there's a danger in that. And I think a lot of times it happens out of necessity because a lot of times there isn't anybody else willing to. And so this person has stepped up and so they feel like every year, you know, I should get that phone call.
You're so generous.
Not always. But I think there's danger in the complacency of expecting or even desiring a leadership role, because I think the moment that I start to say I want to be that, I need to ask myself why. am I going into it with the intentions that Christ had in mind? A leadership of service? Do I understand the responsibility that that might entail? Or am I seeing it as a kind of status symbol, or, no, I would never be a deacon, but eldership, that's my thing. And I know I've been guilty of saying no to certain posts because I didn't feel like I was qualified for them. And I don't think you're ever really qualified, right? But there were some posts where I thought, oh, yeah, I'm going to really struggle.
And did you?
I did, yeah. but I think the whole idea is not to be motivated by personal desire and by thinking that it's about power. It might be about power outside. It should never be about power in the local church. Christ says the first should be last. And that's the kind of mindset that we should operate with, is that if I want to do something, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be a leader and wanting to be involved in God's church. But what are the motivations? Am I doing it because I'm so motivated by what Christ has done in my life that I want to share in any capacity that I can? And I think if that is your motivation, then by all means, you should articulate and say what it is that you feel like you can help the church with, and how you can be of service. But always just watching that ego, because it comes up. It's a real thing.
I love this. Because, you're just reminding us that a workshop or a seminar on self-worth could be capacity building for leaders, for the leaders of tomorrow, on sort of navigating your ego. We have been sort of taught societally to learn that our ego is a bad thing. God don't create no bad things. So it's about. So I feel like it's coming up in me that there are so many different ways in which we can build capacity for local church leadership without having leadership training. But it's the other stuff, our humanness, and then we get to deal with things like leadership and the expectation of perfection.
And self-worth that's the key conversation, because having an inflated ego and having low self-worth are flip sides of the same coin, right? A lot of times we go kind of, hectic in either direction. So on the one day, I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, and no one can say anything to me. And on the other day, I'm completely worthless. And those are real feelings that we go through. And so it's about getting to a different coin where we're saying, I'm imperfect. I'm going to make mistakes, but at the same time, I'm a necessary part of this church movement. I'm valued. Christ wants me here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be part of your local church if you weren't wanted there. And so I think once we are empowered and we realize that our value comes from our relationship with Christ and our connection with Him as His sons and daughters, which we are no matter what, then we don't have to perform for value, right? And I think that's a really empowering idea.
That's another thing now. Performing for value. Another bulletin board special feature at some point. But actually, we got another text message on this capacity building, learning, growing thing. In Principles for Christian Leaders, Ellen White says the following: as we seek for wisdom to know how to lead well, we have the assurance that God is teaching, leading, and guiding His people. Amid the challenges that leaders deal with each day, we would do well to remember that the only safety for any one of us is in walking humbly with God, going where the Master leads the way. With our eyes on Him, our confidence can be found in following in His footsteps. Ingrid Cupido, thank you for that. Ingrid believes that this method has worked well for leaders in the past at any level, and will continue to do so in the future. And the key for me here is seek wisdom to know how to lead well. It's almost like taking to action those who are already in leadership positions. It's saying, how to lead is not just going to come to you. You also have a responsibility to go and get.
Yeah, 100%.
And your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think, and it's not even about getting in an extractive way to say, I'm just going to speak to this person because I want their wisdom. I think it's about also going in and saying, listen, I'm in a position where I need help, and I know that you are good at this, and I want to acknowledge that as well, and help someone feel seen, but at the same time to say, I'm willing to learn from you. And I think there's nothing that makes some, very few people have ever come to me and said, can you please show me how to do this? But the attitude, but in the few moments where that has happened, the person's attitude in which they and so the text message said walk humbly with God. That kind of humility, it really comes through, and you really want to help someone because they're earnest, and so they're not just coming to you to pick your brain. They're coming to you because they need help, and we need to rely on one another. We would never be able to do this by ourselves. And then just going to the other part of that text message, walking with God. I mean, how beautiful is that idea that in whatever kind of space leadership takes you, and it's God that's taking you, but through this, a veil of leadership, that you don't have to be alone. We don't have to feel isolated as leaders in local churches, because we know it's God's church, and we know we're working with Him and walking with Him. And so we start to, draw from Him and learn from Him and talk to Him. Because when you're walking with someone, you don't just want to walk with them, you want to talk to them as well,
Exactly.
And so allowing Him to feed us, it's a beautiful idea. It really is.
The future of church leadership. One thing is for sure, we're not going to exhaust this discussion. So to you, our viewers, why don't we keep this conversation alive? Samuel, what are you going to do to keep this convo alive?
I need to think about it first. I think the first thing is probably just speaking to my local church and not to the church from the pulpit. Speaking to people individually and asking them maybe where they see the church in 10 years. That might be a fantastic conversation to have. Because if people see the church as, okay, this is going to be a ship that I want to be a part of, then that's really exciting, right? And at the same time, if they think it's a ship that they feel like, they're going to head off, we could ask why. And how can we make this ship, designed in such a way that we all want to be contributing to it until Jesus comes? Because I believe in this church. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in this position.
Wow. It's moving to hear you say that. Because it actually reflects how I feel, but I've never said it out loud. Wow. That's a section you might want to rewind. But Denise also suggested some action that we could take. We should constantly be inviting young people into leadership roles in a nurturing environment. If we're not going to be investing in our youth today, who will be the leaders of tomorrow? And what an exciting time for the church right now, because young people can share the gospel via their different social media platforms in fun and new ways that older adults are not necessarily able to. We need to tap into their creativity and empower them. I want to change this. I want to say we need to tap into our creativity. I'm also young people, and empower them as much as possible. And above all, we need to love, nurture, and support them. What last pearls of wisdom do you have for us, Samuel?
I think let's take it back to the basics. I don't have any pearls of wisdom, but I think love one another. It starts there. It starts with loving Christ, allowing Christ to live in us, and then showing that love, because we can't keep that love to ourselves. Love is something that needs to be shared. And so once we start loving one another and asking each other, how can I make your walk with God an even more pleasant one? And then inviting people to do things, because we're all talented and gifted in different ways. And so once we find out what people's talents and gifts are, you might be blown away. And I think you might be a lot more excited about the leadership of your local church and the future of your local church.
I love that. So, we do have news from our channel. I know, man. I know. I also felt the feelings at 19:30 on Friday night, but not to worry. Himalong Season 4 will be back on our screens at the end of June, just in time for our channel's 1-year anniversary. Can you believe it's been a year since we started doing this? God is good. In the meantime, keep an eye on our channel socials and use our WhatsApp number 0634841632 and our email address info@comealong.co.za to get hold of us. I'm still buzzing with so much energy to talk about the future of local church leadership. And, this is one of those situations where the discussion is the point. Not that everything is tied up in a neat little bow. So thank you to our Bulletin Board special guest, Samuel Mark Julius. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, we'll see you next Monday at 1900 for the premiere as we take another look at the Bulletin Board. Don't forget the poster reel after the credits, no? My name is Lisa Marie Smith. 'n lekker week vir julle almal. Dis onibona next time.